Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 294 for Monday, April 22nd, 2024. This is the Spawn Chunks, a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcasting platforms, including YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Jonny, who you may know better on the internet as Pixelriffs. Hello, sir.
Hello, and we've been talking in the render distance about the Fallout TV series, among other things. We've also been talking face-to-face for the first time in a little while, because Joel and I have started to tinker with a video format for the podcast, which we might be working on in future and might be rolling out to the main podcast whenever we hit a certain milestone. So for now, that's a Discord exclusive for patrons who are able to join us listening to the show live when we record it in the podcast every week, and you can support the podcast by going to patreon.com/thespawnchunks. That also gets you access to things like monthly Minecraft Hangouts, where we ask our patrons what they've been up to in Minecraft that month, our quarterly Hangouts where we go into behind the scenes facts and figures of the show, and of course exclusive previews of stuff like this when we tinker with the format a little bit just to see what's working.
And we have one of those coming up this Saturday, I believe. The monthly Minecraft Hangout for April.
Yes, yeah, lots in the calendar right now. It feels like it's going to be a busy time, and we've got releases to talk about in today's show, or at least pre-releases for the game itself, and we're looking ahead to 1.21. But in the meantime, let's touch base. What's new in your Minecraft life, Joel?
So I have been busy working on the planting of all of the lilacs in the lilac farmstead just outside of Westhill. And it's been fun to take the time to choose the blocks, figure out the pallets. That takes like half a stream or something. And then the next couple of streams, you don't really have a lot of decision making to do. When you're working on a big field like this, you're essentially just removing blocks, planting things, moving stuff around. And I think I might have gone a little heavy on the pitcher plants. I decided that I wanted the pitcher plants to be on farmland, because something I didn't realize is that just when you have the pitcher plant and you can plant it everywhere, you just get the plant. You don't get the bulb at the bottom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Regardless of whether you put it on farmland again. So in order to keep the bulb at the bottom, you have to use farmland, grow it from a bulb, and then leave it there and not move it. Well, that means everything has to start from a bulb. So I've got lots of pitcher plants, but I only had a handful of bulbs. So shout out to Cosmic Dancer, who has the, I think the only sniffer farm on the server, who dropped by with some bulbs so I could plant some things. And I might have gone a little bit heavy. It's no longer feeling like a lilac farmstead. It's kind of like a pitcher plant farmstead. So I might have to dial that back a little bit. But it did turn out quite nicely. I like the combination of the turquoise of the pitcher plants and the pink and the purple in the lilacs. I think it's balanced quite well. It's also nice just to have fields of anything too tall, 2 blocks tall in the game. Like I feel like those flowers really, with the exception of maybe sunflowers because they're so skinny, but rose bushes, lilacs, peonies, like any kind of tall double-sized plant in the game really fills out the countryside, and it's starting to give a nice splash of color when you're walking into Westhill, which is still predominantly brown and gray, with the exception of maybe wheat field or potato fields and stuff like that. So we're adding more variety as you walk down the road. So that's been fun. And then I moved on to the inside. So I've been kind of learning a lesson from how I handled the inn that I did a couple of weeks ago. And instead of just doing all the outside and then moving on to the inside or vice versa, I've been bopping back and forth. And the reason for that is because before I did all of the gardens and all the things outside of the farmhouse, I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to nudge any walls, windows didn't need like sills or flowers, pots outside of them, that kind of thing. So I did all the inside design, which was pretty straightforward. It's not a very big house. There's like 1 bedroom and then a 1 room kind of like dining kitchen place. And I added some shelves and I really like using chiseled bookshelves for like cabinetry. Like it looks like shelves where you might put stuff on. They're unfortunately empty until you put books on them, and you can't put anything else on them. But I did a little trick with that where I put some trapdoors up to make it look like there was cupboard doors and one of them was open. There's a smoker with a stovepipe and just all that kind of stuff inside. And once I cemented all of that and knew, okay, the outside is not moving, I then started, I've only done the back of the house. I haven't done all the sides. I've done the back and one side. So I've got half of it done. The front yard and like this other side yard I have yet to do. But I just, started planting flowers, bushes, vines going up the side of the house, a wood pile, chopping wood for the stove, like all that kind of stuff. Carrot garden, just little things around that add that touch of function, touch of life. Wood pile beside the chimney, all those things. And it's slow, but it really pays off, because I feel like when you're walking around the place now, every time you turn a corner on the house, there's something new to look at. Like it's a wood pile, then it's a carrot garden, then it's like the field of everything, and then there's beets and stuff planted. Now I do have a couple of custom textures. So I've planted beetroot everywhere, because my custom beetroot texture goes with lilacs very well. So it wouldn't be the same for a vanilla texture pack. They would be very red, and you might want to choose something else to go there. But I like the green on the carrots. The green on the carrots is vanilla, I think, and that just goes with some of the other greenery around. So that's kind of what I've been doing. I'm just slowly moving outward, kind of like dropping a pebble in a pond. And as the ripples go out from the house, I'm kind of like taking the extra time to put in those details, moving some walls, making sure things are a little bit streamlined, removing extra space where it doesn't make any sense. Because you feel like when these people are building their farms, like they're probably not the richest people in the world. And if they have a lot of extra space, it feels extravagant. So I chopped down the front yard in half just because it felt spacious. I think somebody in my chat said they have a rugby pitch in their front yard. It's like, yeah, it's a little big.
Yeah.
we need to dial that back. So most of the land is allocated for like farming and function and stuff like that now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's nice seeing a little bit more outdoorsy activity happening in Minecraft right now. I think people are also trying to, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, emulate the fact that it's spring now, and it feels like we should be getting outdoors. Yep. But when you're like in Minecraft and you're doing kind of outdoor activities, it's not quite the same thing, but it's close enough. It's an approximation of like springtime activity, and spring cleaning and a bit of gardening gets thrown in there, and it feels like a good time to be out of the house, where you've spent a bunch of winter working on, paths and rivers and the insides of castles and things.
Oh, for sure. And there's definitely been that mix of it's been a rainy spring day in Nova Scotia, and I'm in Minecraft in the sunshine planting flowers, and it feels like a nice break. Yeah. Really bright and sunny, especially when you turn on shaders and you take a couple screenshots. It's very, very pleasant. And then the reverse, when it's a beautiful day outside, and you're like, the 80s kid in you kicks in, and you can hear your mom saying, go play outside. Yeah. It's like, but this is my job. Like, I kind of have to do this. Mm-hmm. And then you're inside of Minecraft, and then it starts to rain in Minecraft every day, Mojang. Yeah. Every day in Minecraft. Could we dial it back just a little bit? And, I ironically on the weekend, it was kind of a fun little inside joke, but like every time I decided to like step back and talk about something and why I chose the colors I chose and why I was doing, it started to rain and everything turned gray. Yeah. It was just like, okay, I have to now wait until I can sleep to get rid of this. Like it was funny, but annoying at the same time.
It's providing some of that like calming ambience for you to sort of discuss all of that stuff. It feels very zen, but like visually speaking, I'm sure it's really annoying.
Yeah. So that's it for me. I mean, I've been focusing on this farm. We're up to, I think, 7 streams now, and it'll be wrapping up soon because there's really not much left to do other than just like the fill in the gaps, paint by number, like all the decisions have been made. So what's new with you? What have you been up to in Minecraft?
It's been raining occasionally on Minecraft SOS as well, and it never rains, but it pours. I am 2/3 of the way done with my dig. That has been helped tremendously by the fact that a few people have got really interested in the project in general. It's sort of taken on a life of its own. There may be several people trying to start a cult around the hole, and I'm doing my best to not become a cult leader, but it does mean that I get a little extra help working on some of the digging. So, like, a bunch of folks came over the other day and helped me dig out a few chunks, so I'm more than 2/3 of the way done. I also suffered my second death of the series, which is now out on YouTube, so if anybody wants to go and check out exactly how that happened. But basically, having promised a few people some Efficiency 5 tools so they could take advantage of haste while they were there, I went to the Enderman farm, tried to grind for a few levels so I could do some enchanting, and as I left, it seems like a bunch of the Endermen who I had aggroed in the farm followed me, which wasn't a problem when I left, it was a problem when I came back. And so on the bridge out to the Enderman farm, I fell down the sort of safe fall into a little water source that we have there. stepped out of that, saw an Enderman standing on the rail that connects the farm to the end island, kind of went, how did that guy get there? And suddenly 12 Endermen jumped me from behind. It was like I got mugged by Endermen. And
Wow.
like a bunch of them swarmed all around me. My shield was broken in about 2 hits. And then I tried to escape, but they were dealing like a third of my health bar with every hit, so I was trying to like fly away and get my elytra going, but I simply couldn't outpace them. So yeah, ended up having to be revived, and there are certainly people on the server who have died more frequently than I have at this point, but I think because the cost to revive us is going up, we have to consider not necessarily how many times somebody has died, but how expensive it has been to revive them. And I think at this point, with 2 deaths, one at the very beginning of the server and one now, I've actually gotten as expensive as people who've died like 3 or 4 times when it was just cheaper to revive us and we weren't as well equipped. But I was there wearing like protection diamond armor. The only concession was my elytra, and I still got absolutely flattened by these Endermans. So I think it goes to show you really can't rest easy when it comes to hardcore worlds. You've got to be on your toes constantly.
So what happened? Did the Enderman teleport outside of the farm? Like, I thought that those farms usually have like non-teleportation blocks all around.
They do. A couple of blocks had been broken, but they're all leaf blocks, so they shouldn't be the most easy for Enderman to teleport to anyway, and a lot of them have additional layers of like slabs and carpet and stuff like that, but actually fully 100% guaranteeing a teleport-proof Enderman farm is a lot more difficult because of like multiple layers of carpet seeming to be one of the only things that really invalidates it as a spawnable or teleportable space. And yet spawning and teleportation have to be considered as 2 very different mechanics if you want to thoroughly get both of them in check. And occasionally it would happen when you were using the farm where there's a canopy of leaves sort of above the player at a 2-block height, and you'd turn around and there'd be one Enderman standing there. And so you occasionally just have to swipe at one guy who's like guarding the exit. So that was fine. I thought that was all I needed to worry about, all I needed to attend to in the functionality of this farm. But it turned out somehow that a few more of them got out. I think it may also have been due to the fact that a few of the leaves behind where the Endermen are standing had been broken by people just kind of, I guess, holding down left click occasionally and swinging a sword where there weren't any mobs to hit. And so the leaves behind that having been broken, you could see directly over to the spawning platform because it's a very flat kind of design. They just walk up a couple of steps and then drop into a trap. And so I think looking directly at the Enderman to aggro them instead of waiting for them to be drawn in by the Endermite probably had something to do with them being aggressive specifically towards the player instead of their attention being drawn by the Endermite that's supposed to get them in there in the first place. So I've now replaced that with obsidian because I don't want anybody breaking that if it's going to cost me, 6 coins to revive me when they are few and far between at this point in the series.
Yeah, that would get expensive quickly. I think that we have double carpet everywhere on our Enderman farm, although I haven't used it in a long time and it doesn't get used very often at all. So we might have bugs like that we just haven't, I guess, tested enough to discover. But we had set it up later in our game, so the double carpet was easier to do because we weren't just trying to get it going like not day one, but like it wasn't like an early Enderman farm. It was like an established world Enderman farm. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess with SOS being, intended to be a short-term relatively as an experience, and hardcore, I always find it difficult to wrap my head around hardcore because like I would be the player that would die smashing myself off of a ledge when I took off from my elytra, or jumping off of a roof forgetting I don't have one, and just taking just enough damage, because I am absolutely guilty of building to the point where I can't sprint because I'm so hungry. And then if I deal with a mob, I've died recently to skeletons just that show up after I sleep for the night because I haven't eaten, and I also just go in there thinking I'm endgame, I can handle a skeleton. Wait a minute, I only have 2 hearts, and then I'm dead. I'm just like, well, wait a minute,
you can't sprint at them when you've got that low hunger and everything.
Exactly. It's like, I know how to play this game honest. It's like, nope, apparently not. Just not paying attention to that stuff, right?
Yeah, it's tricky, but I'm fortunate enough to have not died in the interim, and so Yeah, I think I've got a pretty decent record on this server right now. Like I've died a couple of times in unfortunate circumstances when I just wasn't well enough prepared. But I think going forward I'll be a little bit more cautious, and I'm hoping to last out the rest of the series because I need to get this dig finished. I need people to see what I've been working towards this whole time.
It's looking good. I mean, it's a huge project, and I imagine really satisfying to have so much of it done now. It's starting to really look like what you've shown me that you're planning on doing, as opposed to just a dig project. Like I'm even now starting to see a bit of shape and a bit of, thought process and stuff behind it.
Yeah. The most exciting thing for me is just revealing the rest of that ancient city. It's not the entire thing, obviously, but we're opening up a lot of it to the open air, and it's my first time going to be looking at one of those structures without anything covering it, without the atmosphere of the cave, and I feel like that's going to be fun for people to see.
Totally. Moving on to the news, since our last show on Monday, April 15th, there has been 5 pre-releases for Java Edition 1.20.5. Pre-release 2 was released on April 15th, pre-release 3 on April 16th, pre-release 4 on April 17th, release candidate 1 on April 18th, and release candidate 2 published on April 19th. The majority of these releases contain only minor tweaks or bug fixes, but in 1.20.5 pre-release 2, there are following notable changes. The snippet advancement is renamed to Sheer Brilliance. The animated nether portal and end portal textures are used for the loading screens when traveling to their respective dimensions. And for a full list of the additional bugs and tweaks, check out the changelogs linked in our show notes, or look for the full 1.20.5 changelog, which should be published alongside its release, presumably later this week.
Yeah, I'm thinking we're going to get a release later this week because over on Minecraft's YouTube channel, they published a video called All About the Armored Pause Drop, which seems to be what they are informally or formally calling 1.20.5. It's rare that we actually get like a proper title for the minor releases like this, but obviously this has some significant features. In this video, game director Agnes, game developers Nembon and Marco, and art director Jasper get to talk all about the Armadillo, Wolf Armor, and Wolf variants. So a great way to catch up for anybody who hasn't been following the snapshots changelog by changelog or might be a little bit confused about what's coming in this update versus 1.21. This video should get you up to speed. That's over at youtube.com/Minecraft.
So now that we are on the cusp of the release of 1.20.5, do you have plans to return to the survival guide?
Yes, I'm going to be updating the survival guide as soon as the update arrives, since I don't have to worry about datapack compatibility or mods or anything like that. It's a purely vanilla series, and so not only is it nice and easy for me to update, it's also a fun incentive to get back into the survival guide. Previous minor updates haven't really brought anything of major interest to me. They had the fix where decorated pots could hold contents and stuff like that, but that wasn't necessarily something that I was itching to get back into. But then the wolf variants, wolf armor, the armadillo, all of that is something I can go out and do a nice concise video about at a certain point in the near future. I still need to go back and finish my Wither Skeleton farm first, but then potentially I might be getting some wolves involved in the killing mechanism for the Wither Skeleton farm and stuff like that, so there's potential for that to be kind of useful too. Yeah, having some incentive to get into the survival guide is good. Minecraft SOS shows no signs of updating to 1.20.5. I think because we have mods and a few data packs on there, it's just going to be more trouble than it's worth at this stage in the server's life. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this. And naturally, the next goalpost being 1.21, I imagine we're not that far away from that either.
And that's kind of what I'm looking at. As I mentioned last week, I think on the show, we won't be updating the Citadel until 1.21 because we just updated to 1.20.4, which is a lot of background admin work with updating the mods and data packs and things like that. And it's not, I don't really consider it a heavily modded server, but we do have performance mods that help with some of our server members that don't have the latest, greatest PC. And so that is essential to people enjoying the server. And there's not really enough hanging in the balance, I think, for 1.20.5 for us to warrant going ahead without the mods. I think we'd all just rather wait and get the full release of both 1.20.5 and everything coming with 1.21 all at the same time when that happens. And hopefully the distance between 0.5 and 21 will give mod authors and data pack authors a chance to either rewrite or update to the point where we can have those mods, including myself. I've got some recipe data packs that we like on the server that I would need to update depending on how things go. I also haven't really heard from any of my server mates that are just, champing at the bit for the content for 1.20.5.
Sure.
I think everybody's wrapped up in their long-term projects. Armadillos and wolves variants don't seem to really have a big thing. I think that might be a little different if trial chambers were around and the crafter. I know Alistair and I are very technical, so the crafter would be our draw. And I know that other people like to use copper, a lot of bright colors in the copper palette. And I think that trial chambers might be appealing in that way. So I think there will be more excitement on the server for 1.21.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is 1.20.5 obviously adds something that the community voted in the form of the armadillo and wolf armor. So
Sure.
I think that's going to be incentive for a lot of people to update. And naturally, Bedrock players are going to be updating because Bedrock just rolls forward to the next version automatically anyway. But then I think a lot of Java players are going to maybe think twice before updating to this one immediately, just because of the amount of stuff that's changed on the back end and the amount of the community that does rely on like data packs from vanilla tweaks, which some of which have had some pretty significant changes. I saw a warning that rolled out about the gravestones data pack that normally stores all of your inventory in it until you return to the spot where you died, which has been modded in the past and is now, simple enough, and or the data packs have become complex enough that people can use it. That will, with the changes to item format, will actually destroy or delete any items which were in gravestones at the time the server was updated. So basically, you've got to go and find your gravestone before the new item component system comes into effect. Otherwise, the server isn't going to know what items to produce because they're all going to be coded slightly differently. So you're going to end up losing a lot of equipment that way if you died somewhere distant that you really wanted to recover. So yeah, keep an eye out for that for listeners who are curious about updating to 1.20.5. Outside of that, I think the portal transitions they added in that pre-release actually look really slick. Along with like the menu screen blurs, they tie Minecraft into that more modern aesthetic that we've been talking about with recent like UI changes. And I think honestly, it just helps that we're getting an upgrade from dirt. It's the kind of thing where when you'd be going through a nether portal for the first time, it's really weird that you just get a loading screen that says, loading dimension or whatever, and then there's just a dirt background. Always felt a little jarring to me, but I think moving into using the nether portal and end portal textures for those transitions is a really good move.
I like that they've added a slider as well for the transparency of the menu. I don't know if they've added a slider for the texture transitions from portals, but I know that the portal animation previously, several updates ago, had a slider where if you don't like the wobbly effect, like if it gives you a little headache or you find it, it gives you a little bit of nausea, then you can reduce it, turn it off all the way, or make it less intense. And they've also added the ability with the transparency in the menu. I'm assuming for people that are maybe visually impaired or that just don't like it, to turn it off entirely. Rather than just taking on a scale of like intense to less intense, there's also an off, which is nice.
Yeah.
I like it though. I whenever I boot up the snapshot to take like a screenshot, sometimes for content that we have on the title card art for the show, armadillos or whatever, because I don't have them natively on the Citadel, I have to open up a snapshot, and I find that it's a pleasant experience. Like it's not something that you kind of notice immediately, like, oh yeah, this is all new. It's more just like a feeling you get when you load up the screen. It's subtle, and you're right. It feels more modern.
Weirdly enough, the most exposure I have to it at this point was playing the Poisonous Potato update for April Fools. That's probably the longest I've spent in a snapshot since they made that change, and yeah, it did feel kind of slick, and I had to remind myself, this is part of Minecraft going forward. This isn't just something that they've done for the April Fool's snapshot that, seems like it's not a joke change that they've made. It's actually legit. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that just feeling like a little bit smoother and more modern as we roll into the next updates.
And I'm looking forward to seeing the survival guide, explore the new update, armadillos, the different wolf variants, because I do, while I'm not rushing for them, I think that wolf variants would be a fun little add to West Hill.
Yeah.
I think that I know that maybe Alistair on the server, because he's got a very similar town in Avalon that could probably do with some different animals around. And I don't think he has cats, but I think he might have a wolf or two. And having them be different colors could be kind of fun too. So there are definitely things that I think are appealing coming out in 1.20.5, and also just the bug fixes. Like, it's just nice to have less of that quirky stuff happening in the background, because with these minor releases, which I say in air quotes, that's just kind of what they're designated. I wouldn't call them minor in that they're less work. But there tends to be a lot of bug fixes that are not just about the new update. They're also about existing bugs in Minecraft. Whereas I find that when there's a big, like a major release like 1.21, a lot of the bug fixes that you see leading up to the release tend to be about the new content being integrated and functioning correctly. Whereas these ones, we tend to see bugs that are like long standing that are being ironed out.
Yeah, especially with the breeze coming up, there's a lot of emphasis on projectiles and redirecting those, and so in a lot of these changelogs recently, you'll see, ghast fireballs and various other projectiles becoming more consistent to redirect by various means, and it's just tightening up all of the mechanics that the current updates are building upon, and providing a bit more framework for them to do fun stuff with them in future. So I think it's good, and yeah, looking forward to 1.20.5, hopefully, fingers crossed, this week.
Moving on to chunk mail. If you would like to email the show, you can send an email along to spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Episode 300 is fast approaching. We are planning an all Q&A episode to celebrate. To try and include as many members of the community as possible, please send in a one-sentence question asking us about anything you would like. Minecraft, podcasting, video games, inspiration, experience, whatever. Try to keep them fun. Keep them short, obviously. And be sure to add 300 Q&A to the subject line of the email so they can be easily organized for that show.
Our first email this week comes in from Banan with the subject of fun with subblocks. Hi, Pix and Joel. I've never missed an episode ever since I started listening during the pandemic. You've accompanied me on countless bicycle rides. Often when I'm decorating, I'm looking for fun subblock details, and I find myself wishing we had wooden beams at player scale. I'm picturing them a block long, half a block wide, and about quarter of a block thick, maybe narrower and thinner. They could be used for so many details. Support beams, floating stairs where you can see between the steps. You could hang lanterns and signs from them. They could function as shelving or window frames, custom tree branches, you name it. You know how slabs place differently depending on where you aim when you place them? These beams could have 5 or 9 possible placements. Imagine a 3x3 grid similar to the empty bookshelf. It would be cool if you could place multiple in the same block space. Without these features, they may not be different enough from slabs. One way to implement them would be just to update sticks to be placeable in the world. Like fences and walls, they could change shape depending on their placement. For example, they could be seamless when extending another beam. When touching a full block, they could have a small angled frame like the foot of an end rod, except it looks more like a truss. You could then use dye on the placed sticks to change their color, and some of the colors could be picked to match with existing wood colors. This eliminates extra load on the inventory, but I must admit is also very cheap in terms of resources. What do you guys think of this idea? Banan died of hunger after having to repeatedly jump while climbing floating stairs made out of slabs. P.S. Ever since you mentioned the idea of apples as placeable items comparable to pickles, I've not been able to get them out of my mind. I would love to see this kind of thing added to Minecraft.
Just on that PS, I think that that's a really interesting point too, to address items that are in the game that wouldn't need another item in the inventory. Like apples would just be different. You could still eat them. You could still, do the things that you would want them. They would look a little bit different in an item frame, I think, if they had a 3D model. But then if you place them in the world like a sea pickle, then you would have something else to decorate with. And I other than adding a block model to the world, I don't know that it puts any stress on inventory or other things. It just has to be coded slightly differently. This is me speaking, not knowing how to code in Minecraft. So forgive me if I'm overstepping, but I love that idea. I forgot that we had mentioned that.
Yeah.
Because we've been doing this for so long, apparently.
It would be so good for like fruit stalls, market stalls kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like you look at the open markets that people build in like medieval towns. I'm sure you've got a few kind of like outdoor tradesperson stalls in West Hill that could just have a few apples kind of dotted around here and there, or like kitchen builds that would benefit from stuff like that. It's funny how the player's relationship to food in the game is purely in item form, except cake. Like, cake is the one thing that you can put down in the world and then eat from the block in front of you, which obviously leads to people doing ridiculous stuff with cake, you know, making floors out of it and stuff, or just, like, eating cake off the floor like some kind of gremlin. But I think it's kind of a neat thing to think about extending to other aspects of the food universe in Minecraft in future. So yeah, I would like to see something like that in future as well.
I do like the idea of the beams. It's an interesting scale as well, because normally when I think about wooden beams or something like that added to the game, I think I want wooden walls. Like I want that kind of wall shape, but with like the bark texture or the plank texture or the stripped log texture or whatever.
Yeah.
But this idea from Banan is something that's kind of in between a slab and a trapdoor. And I imagine it would be either a wood plank texture or a stripped wood texture, probably stripped wood. When you think about a bare beam, like in construction, that's kind of what I would imagine.
Yeah.
I like the combo use. Like there's the obvious medieval holding up walls, supports, things like that. But then the more modern application of having floating stairs, window frames. There's a lot of modern architecture that has like vertical wooden slats as part of like breaking up the light or breaking up the wall, or just decorative, just like a visual break in the large structure. I see a lot of natural wood color and black happening in modern architecture on Instagram when I browse around. And I think that would be a really, really fun way to add something like this to Minecraft, especially because it would sort of be like a vertical slab, but it would have its own, I guess, purpose and function and things. And similar to using trapdoors to kind of like draw horizontally on a wall if you wanted to, this would probably be able to do that, but with a little bit more connectivity and without all the combinations of trapdoors that have like funny cutouts in them. Like that's why spruce trapdoors and dark oak trapdoors are so popular, is because they don't have a window. They don't have like a see-through port to them. And you can use them as a trapdoor, or you can use them as a wall, as a support, that kind of thing. And I think that these would be more support, more solid, more like just opaque things that you could add to the details of your build. Even going to something that you mentioned, I think last week on the show, talking about depth and trying to add like pillars and structure to the outside, but you have to do it in 1 by 1 meter, trunks of trees. And this would be a much smaller space to do that in, which I think could be very, very cool. Now, when it gets away from the vanilla feel, I think, is when the implementation and that talk of like painting them and trusses and things like that, that's where it starts to get, I think, beyond what I would consider like the vanilla vibe to it. And I think the sticks idea was just because Banan didn't have a better way of implementing them at the top of mind. Because I agree with them. I think it's a little cheap in terms of what it would be constructed. I would imagine that these would be constructed very similar to trapdoors. Maybe not the same payout, but it would be a similar kind of idea. You take planks and you put them in a crafting table to get whatever this is, maybe like a 4x4 or something like that. But I feel like when you get into blocks that behave differently depending on what they're attached to, you end in that weird realm where other building games tend to frustrate me, where like I want this fence to look like a fence, but then when I put it next to something, it changes the way that it looks.
Yeah.
And until I memorize all of those different combinations, I don't get what I want when I put it down. One of the strengths that I think Minecraft has is that when you put a block down, most of the time you get exactly what it is. And then it's your imagination and your combination of how you're putting those blocks down that create the shapes and things that you want. I think a good exception where it does work in a good way is how fence gates and walls kind of go lower and compared to when they're on fences. And I don't know why they made that change, but it's something that everybody knows. Once you know it, you could use it to your advantage. But when it happens on other things like that truss idea, I think that would be frustrating because like if you didn't want that truss, how do you get rid of it? Are you stuck just not, you know, having to do something else, you know, that has to be not a solid block? Well, what if you want a solid block there? So I think more control and more straightforward leads to more imaginative solutions from players. So usually when these things are suggested, I find they often start off as a really good idea and then they go just a little bit farther into, I don't know, modded or whatever you want to say, where it becomes, even though the intention is to be more functional and have more options, it ends up being more restrictive in the long run.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think the what you see is what you get approach that Minecraft has really does benefit how logical the game feels and how little explanation a lot of the placement of building blocks needs. You don't need to be taught how to use fences, you just kind of throw them down and see what they look like. Whereas going back to the building of something like Enshrouded, which I played recently, that's a game in which a lot of the materials find interesting ways to blend, which looks great if you're using them for more conventional building, but then as soon as you start to try and impose your own imagination on it, you are left with a lot of these textures and things that sort of morph themselves to suit. Like, if I want to put a single wooden plank inset in a stone wall, let's say, how the border of that plank interacts with the stone wall is like a preset thing. And so it doesn't always just look like that area has been boarded up. It looks like it's been reinforced with additional joists of wood and stuff that I didn't necessarily want, but that's my only option available in that color. And all of the other colors are ones I don't like. And so, yeah, Minecraft just being that very easy one-to-one kind of thing makes it so much more intuitive to players who just want to build and use their imagination for it. The other thing about the emails ideas, I think I agree with you. I think sticks are too cheap, but it's a smart way of doing what you said about the apples as well, of reusing an item that doesn't currently have like a placement purpose in the world and not clogging up people's inventory space as a result, right? So I think that part of it is kind of smart. Not a mechanic I really foresee them using because it's difficult to teach people that old items have new uses without there being some really obvious signposting of that. Like when camels come into the game, they're surrounded by cacti in the desert, so try feeding them a cactus and see what happens. Okay, that's how they breed. Whereas like teaching people that sticks can be placed now is, you know, something that people are going to stumble upon randomly and oftentimes go, well, I don't want them to do that. And if it's something as common as sticks, you're going to find people like randomly placing beams all over the place. The other thing is I love the idea of having more placement zones in the way that they brought up the example of chiseled bookshelves and being able to look at 6 different areas on the block and place a book in the individual slots of the bookshelf. Or when you're placing slabs or stairs and you look at one corner in order to attach it to that corner and have the stair angle itself. But the problem with that is that then you're contending with, do I have the beam flush against the ceiling, or do I have it on the lower half of the block space so I can hang a lantern from it? You can't do both, because then, otherwise the lantern is dangling in midair with no chain connecting it to the beam above, or your beam is kind of coming down from the ceiling at a weird half block height that you don't really have any control over. And so that there are a few different like stumbling blocks when it comes to the beam placement idea, and I love the idea of it, but the player scale thing is really the most compelling part of this idea. It's having wooden beams that aren't massive for smaller indoor spaces, areas where you'd move into like the basement of a house and you'd start to like figure out what you wanted the ceiling to look like, and you'd realize that, you know, the 2 wooden beams that you want to put in are taking up 50% of the ceiling space, and they just look completely excessive because you wouldn't need to support it with that amount of supporting material. But then that doesn't work for the floor above, and so having finer sub-block control over aesthetic choices like that is something that would be really valuable for builders. It just comes with a lot of other technical hurdles that the team would have to overcome to implement them.
It comes with a lot of connected texture things, like hanging signs, lanterns. I had the same thought that you did about, is it in the top part of the block space or the bottom? Or I think the example in the email, there was a 9x9 grid idea, which means that beam is going through the middle of the block space, which,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how you do. I mean, I guess there'd have to be some gaps because it's a 16 pixel block space. So your beam is going to have to be 4x4 pixels, 6x6 pixels. It can't be 5 because you can't center that on a block.
And everyone on the Reddit is going to get so mad at you not being able to center things on the texture of a block.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about like the like a tic-tac-toe, like that kind of a 3x3 grid.
Yeah.
And I can see the issues arising, quickly. The other thing is that even if you did it in like a 4x4 grid, so like the corners, like it's a fourth of a block, you still run into the same problem where hanging signs and lanterns hang from the middle of the underside of a block. So you'd have your hanging lantern would be hanging from either one edge or the other edge of the beam, not the center of the beam, because you wouldn't be able to center the beam. So yeah, I can see that being quite tricky. Again, like I like the idea of more subblock control, but it gets convoluted quickly when you start thinking about all the other things that you'd want to pair it with in the game. I think the thing that's appealing for me is having something, even if it's not like a 4x4 beam shape, even if it was like a 2x4 beam shape, I feel like I get frustrated when I want to use trapdoors, but I'm limited to the trapdoors that work because they don't look like decorative windows. Like I need them to be more solid. And I've seen texture packs where people have taken like essentially what looks like the spruce trapdoor and just made it for dark oak, made it for oak, make it for all the different colors. So it still matches from a color perspective, but then it doesn't have the weird, ornate stuff. I find that can be good and bad for things, especially in the nether woods when you want to use a trapdoor to smooth out like a copper roof or something like that. But then it's got these weird twisty window holes in it. And it's like, it really doesn't go with the vibe. So I kind of have to put it where I can only see it from the side and not really pay attention, pretend that the twisty vines aren't there. So there's things like that I think could benefit from having this kind of item in the game. And I don't know if we'll ever see something that's like essentially like a half of a half slab. I know that people say half slab all the time, but like it's dividing a slab in half. So it's thicker than, I guess it would be the same because trapdoors are 2 pixels, right?
Yeah.
Slabs are 4.
Like a quarter block, I think, is what we're looking at in terms of like depth. Yeah.
Anyway, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I would love more sub-blocks that we could connect sideways without the obvious vertical connections that stuff like fences have. Like, the only ones that really spring to mind for me currently are chains, end rods, and lightning rods, all of which are quite thin. And so, like, a thicker version of something like that is appealing, but yeah, the actual implementation of it and how you could use it and what material it would be introduced for, like, there's a lot of... Again, you got to remember that there are now, 11 wood types in the game? It's like 10... including bamboo or 10 plus bamboo. I forget exactly. But then if you're doing it for one wood type, you got to do it for all wood types. And so that immediately becomes add 10 or 11 more of these types of items to the game. So if you're introducing it, it's more likely going to be for a newer material. Maybe we start making these things out of calcite instead of wood, and then aesthetically, what do they work for? So there's a lot of considerations making this a much less simple idea than it might appear on paper.
We do have another email this week, but this is going to spring us into our main discussion. So I'll read this first, and then we can dive into it. This is from Evo334, Balancing Productivity and Enjoyment. Hi, Pix and Joel. I'm a regular listener who usually consumes podcasts and audiobooks at double speed to boost productivity. However, last week I had the pleasure of experiencing your podcast at its intended pace, and it was an eye-opening experience. Your discussions often touch on the evolving dynamics of Minecraft SMPs like Hermitcraft and Minecraft SOS, the trend of embracing a slower pace this season in particular. This shift in gameplay got me pondering the balance between productivity and relaxation in Minecraft. In big builds or ambitious projects, there's often a pressure to maximize efficiency and progress rapidly. Yet, this season's emphasis on taking things slower seems to advocate a more relaxed, perhaps even grindless approach. I find this duality fascinating and would love to hear your thoughts on it. How do you think players can strike a balance between being productive making significant progress in their builds or gameplay, and taking the time to enjoy the process, perhaps embracing the grind or opting for less efficiency. Evo334 died drowning in a sea of tasks while fishing for moments of serenity.
It's a very zen way to sign off your email. So really interesting discussion topic. I'm glad that we chose this one to branch out into a main discussion. And I'm pretty familiar with everything that's been going on Hermitcraft, where there are still only 1 or 2 players who are really pushing ahead in terms of technical progression. And while the series in general is known for people building spectacular things, and they're getting there with this season, but they're ramping up to it at a much more, what feels like, approachable and achievable pace for the average Minecraft player, while mixing in a lot of player-to-player interaction. And so my thoughts on this are really split between how it feels to play on a server and how it feels to play in single player and the pace of each of those. How have you approached thinking about this one, Joel? Because I know this was one you were thinking about before we established this week's show.
For me, I think when I look at servers like Hermitcraft that are very busy with content creators that are creating a lot of stuff, I think the biggest thing this season, on top of some people just opting to try and ride horses longer, avoid elytra, that kind of thing, I think it's been the social interaction. I think it's been that while it is still Hermitcraft, they're not all hermits. Like, most of them are living nearly on top of one another on the server.
Yeah.
So while you're intending to log in and build your boat or build your house today, there's a good chance that someone is going to come around and mess with you in a good-natured, fun way.
Yeah.
And that creates probably an entire episode of content that you just didn't intend. And so they're not progressing quite as quickly in their builds and their projects and their game progression because they're just having so much fun hanging out and doing silly stuff. And I think that that's something that I do really enjoy. I think challenging for me watching several creators is that sometimes they overlap. So like I'll fast forward through a 10-minute clip because I've already seen it from one other person's perspective. I don't need to watch it again. I don't skip the video, but I'll fast forward a little bit. And so that kind of stuff has been really interesting, I think, to watch, because on the Citadel, it's a very different vibe because there's only a couple of content creators. It's not edited video. It's usually just Twitch streaming. And I am by far the busiest and certainly on the most, and very often on by myself, just because the time of day that I stream here locally is the middle of the business day. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And so a lot of the server members are local in Canada / the Maritimes. And so they're just not on because they're usually working. And so I don't have a lot of interaction. And the other thing is that I'll want to note here that the Citadel is coming up on 7 years as a server. And I think a lot of the progress pressure and that efficiency and rush comes from servers that reset often enough that it's a repeated thing. So even if it's every 2 years, like on, say, Hermitcraft, you're still starting at the end, or you're starting from the end at the beginning, and you're immediately missing the elytra and all the blocks that you had and all the creative things that you had. And so you want to get to there as fast as you can so your creativity is then unlocked. And we just don't have that happening on the Citadel. And so there's no real push. I think the only time that's ever happened to me is like if I've died and I've lost a lot of stuff, then I really feel the need to immediately go get a new elytra, go get new swords or pickaxes or whatever, because it's going to hinder my gameplay if I don't.
I didn't really feel that push on Minecraft SOS, which was great because we artificially introduced blocks to progress from the early stages just so everybody had a chance to catch up, right? Like I talked in the early stages about not having the Nether open until the server had launched and we were already doing more activities, and even then we didn't have the end open until a couple of weeks later after that so that we could all get together and do an Ender Dragon fight. And so we've sort of introduced those artificial barriers to progress. But our approach has been quite similar to Hermitcraft in that we're all building relatively close together. We chose to set up bases within 1,500 blocks of spawn, and several people are right next door to each other, as in, you can see somebody else's front wall from your back garden. And it really feels like you are neighbors now, and you can, send messages and throw rocks and, whatever else you want to do over the fence. And I think that leads to a lot of videos which are socially driven. There's a lot of cooperation and interaction to those. But those are still videos that you have to go ahead and edit, and you're editing them in the same way that you would probably edit ones that have larger projects. It might take you about the same amount of time to go through the edit, but you're still putting the time into that, which means that the pace of videos coming out is focused so much on these social interactions instead of the progress that you need to make. And so you end up with a lot of smaller videos or perhaps even, more frequent videos just because you're recording a few conversations with people and people talking about, like, what projects are they going to do and the planning stages of that, without it having to be a full story of that build from start to finish that takes 3 weeks to record and, has to go out like a month later. So I think while on an artistic level, players in general are driven by this desire to create spectacle. And this is true, I think, even of projects like yours, which has taken, a few years to build up, but what you have at the end is a medieval city. And like, you're doing that without necessarily worrying too much about the demands of YouTube content, which is another major factor that influences folks like SOS and Hermitcraft, is that the videos that have seen big numbers on YouTube lately are ones that feature large projects. They're big builds, they're transformations of entire biomes. I'm thinking of the kind of stuff that Fwip puts out in his Hardcore series, where every episode feels like a landmark episode, or it's like a long period of gameplay, like 100 days video, or something like that. And lately, I think, while that's still doing well on YouTube, the vocal side of the audience has started to get a bit fatigued with that and has expressed a wish for more of the collaboration between creators. And on multiplayer servers like Hermitcraft and SOS, because we're playing in a multiplayer environment, we can do something that we can't do in the single-player worlds where we're making the big progress in the large builds, which is just go and have fun with somebody else for half an hour, and that's just as entertaining to some viewers as building something spectacular. So I think that sets a pace that seems both more social and interesting to see the dynamics between players, and also much more achievable for the average player who might be on a server themselves but only has a couple of hours to play on the weekends.
I agree that the YouTube thing really does have a stake in the game for pushing those builds to be completed and shown off. The supercut of here's a 5-hour time lapse in a minute and a half.
Yeah.
Or the simple cut of like, I think I need to work on this, and then there's a single cut. So it's been 5 hours and 2 streams later, and now my storage room is done. And you're like, well, that's cool, but like I always related back to when I was learning to paint digitally, and even though I was watching tutorials that I knew were sped up by 2 or 5 times in order to fit the progress of the painting into an hour-long lesson with the voiceover from the creator, when I would go to do it and apply what I've learned practically, I was always kind of subconsciously frustrated that it was taking so long.
Yeah.
And it's because what I had just watched was an hour of a 6-hour painting coming together. And I painted for an hour and felt like I've got nowhere. And it's just that kind of weird mentality of like, but they did it. And it's like, but I have to back up and say, no, that was fast. Like that was cut or edited or sped up or whatever. And I do find that, I often remind myself, I think I just talked about this in stream the other day, that when you're dealing with especially popular videos like from Hermitcraft or SOS, I don't know if everybody on SOS is a full-time content creator, are they?
Basically everyone is, yeah. I think there are a couple of people who have like other gigs that they do basically, so they're not necessarily producing content full-time, but it's like a major part of what they do at least.
Right. And I think that a lot of the hermits, again, there's so many, I'm not familiar with all of them, but all the ones that I watch, I know are full-time and have certainly said so. And so that means that they have at least an 8-hour day where they can sit down and play Minecraft or record or edit or do the things that they need. And I don't. Like I stream on weekends. Like my content creation career is split between podcasting and Twitch and Minecraft. And for me, like I feel like I've made that peace with like, I don't have that kind of time. And I like to remind my viewers when they're talking about big projects, like, look, don't kick yourself if it's taking so long and you're anxious about making progress. Like especially if you're a student, like young players, like you've got a life, you've got soccer practice and school and family and everything. You can only play so many hours. And I think that one of the things that's helped me weirdly is that West Hill started off as a simple idea, but then quite quickly, when I realized what I wanted to do, I just knew that it was going to be a huge project. And so I just kind of resigned myself to saying, it's going to take as long as it takes. I hope it's not going to be something that is never finished. So I did have that goal in mind, but it's one of those things that it's been over 3 years now, 3.5 years. And I've adopted that it'll be done when it's done state of mind. Now, I'm a patient person by nature, and sometimes to a fault. Insert detail-oriented and perfectionist where you like.
That's your Twitter bio now, right? Like that.
yeah. That, and we built this city on spruce trap doors.
Yes.
But it's one of those things where I know it's a unique situation, and in a way, because I'm not on YouTube, I also feel that the Twitch content that I make, if I was rushing through things, then I would just have less content to share with people. The longer that this takes, and I'm not making it take longer than it should, I'm not dragging anything out, but by not rushing through, instead of having a stream where I power through the lilac farm and it's done in 3 streams, I'm on stream 7. Like, that's 14 hours of Minecraft content. Now there's little breaks to like walk and repair my gear or mine some trees when I run out of spruce wood, sure. But a lot of it is focused on building, but taking my time. And I think it gives me a chance. I also think, unlike YouTube videos where a lot of times, I know that some of these people we were talking about stream, but a lot of times the build is happening in a silo. Like you're on your own, you are on the server, but you're building the thing uninterrupted. I'm talking about what I'm doing all the time. I don't play Minecraft outside of streaming. So while I'm building, I also am articulating to a chat room why I'm doing these things, or we're talking about, the latest, Star Trek episode or whatever. But it's something that does slow you down when you're having, similar to a SMP where you're pairing up with somebody and doing some fun project or a fun adventure. I'm interacting with the chat room all the time. And that is also, I don't want to say slowing, but it's just changing the pace at which I can build things. And I've also found that for me, while I am pushing to finish West Hill, I'm not in a rush. I would like to have it done by the time 1.20 comes out or 21 comes out, but it's not going to be the end of my, I'm not going to be upset if it isn't finished. And even though I am pushing, I'm not pushing by rushing gameplay. I'm pushing by increasing my stream frequency. I have made them shorter, but that means that I can usually stream a couple more days a week as opposed to pushing them longer. It's been nice because I've been able to prioritize health in the gym afterwards, but I feel like because of that, I'm fresher the next day. I've not done a 4-hour stream and then have to repeat that again the next day. I've only done 2. And usually when I'm done that 2-hour stream, I'm ending at a point where I can't wait to get back to Minecraft and finish off the farm or finish off the wall or whatever I was working on, because I know that it's starting to come together. And I think that that's a cool combination of like motivation, but also working at that pace that I think is, I don't want to say against the grain, but it's definitely a different vibe than watching a 20-minute YouTube video where some of the stuff would be coming together in edits, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think pacing yourself like that is really important, and it's important to remember that, as with most things that are posted on the internet as a finished product, what you're not seeing is the bones of the thing. Like, you're seeing what people want you to see about this stuff, and so you sort of internalize this idea that it's taking this person 5 minutes to whip up a massive build when really it's not. And yeah, like, I don't think, going back to what I was saying earlier about the big builds versus social interaction, the two are not mutually exclusive. You can still interact while focusing on larger builds, and that's something that I've been doing on SOS with digging this enormous hole out, is that I still get times when people will come over and help me dig out a chunk and we'll just chat, or I use stream times to do a lot of the digging, and it's still all getting done whilst obviously there being a bit of video content in there in terms of the conversations we're having, or when I go off to the Enderman farm and accidentally die, that, becomes a conversation with 5 people who have to come and revive me. And so you can mix in a little bit of that stuff that shows that, yes, this is all actually happening at a much slower pace behind the scenes. And even this project so far, we've had the server live for a couple of months now, and I'm doing, like, digging in this hole basically every day, and I'm still only 2/3 of the way done, if that. So it's important to keep the perspective of like, I'm not just going to have this entire thing done by next week. I've had a couple of people come into my streams lately and go, oh, you still doing this? And I kind of go, well, what else would I be doing? This is genuinely so massive. And going back to the emails focus on productivity and efficiency, this is absolutely something that I could be doing using TNT duplicating, flying machines, and all of that stuff. It would be a little bit more complex because this is a non-square shape, and so I would probably have to just blow out a square of the center and then carve out the circular edges manually in order for it to still feel like the cylinder that I want it to look like at the end. Because TNT is messy. Like, that's the other thing that people don't necessarily appreciate, is that TNT is going to, like, carve weird-looking recesses into the walls where you don't necessarily want them. But even then, there are so many aspects of that I've shut down the idea, not just because TNT is going to destroy a lot of the blocks before I can collect them for rebuilding the whole thing. I don't really need that many blocks to rebuild this, but I've decided that it's about the journey and not necessarily about the destination, or that the journey is a big part of it that I want to share with people instead of hand-waving it all away. And so this is going to be like a long-term project that's going to take me the entire season, and hopefully by the end of the season I'll have achieved what I wanted, but people are along for the ride. And I think as the average Minecraft player, if you're not producing YouTube content or Twitch streams or whatever, you don't necessarily have an audience of people along for the ride, so the pace is whatever pace you want to set. And if you're trying to keep up with people who are, you know, playing around the clock, you know, streaming for 8 hours a day, working on massive projects like that, you're going to find that your pace can't necessarily match that, so you've got to figure out what's within your means to do. Now, in single player, I think I kind of subscribe to this idea that came up in a Reddit thread by a user named Uncommonality a couple of weeks ago or months ago. I'll have a link to it in the show notes for anybody who's interested. And they said, Minecraft feels boring to you because you're playing a solved game. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why people find themselves like either not just getting bored with Minecraft, but feeling like the pace is different to how they remember Minecraft in the early days, or how they kind of imagine Minecraft being when they're playing, is that so many people take the same technical approach with every new world or every project within a world because they know it's the most efficient. You know, you're going to set up the iron farm design that you know, you're going to set up the nether roof gold farm design that you know, you're going to take shortcuts and do what Azuma said when he came on the show and take like the shortest path downhill, right? You're going to always aim for the quickest way of doing something so you can get back to whatever it was you were doing. But you're forgetting that you can actually get more fun out of the game if you forget what you know for a while. Like, you sort of pretend almost that you don't know what's going on in this game, and just try and approach things the way you would naturally do it if you didn't have all of this Minecraft knowledge stored up and you didn't have the library of tutorial videos on YouTube teaching you how to make an iron farm. You know, try observing the way iron golems appear in villages and think, how can I trap them inside the village instead of trapping the villagers inside a farm? And, you know, suddenly the focus on productivity becomes about the journey and not just about the destination, which can lead to the pace of the game changing up considerably and making it feel a lot more rewarding in the process.
I heard a statement from Etho to that effect recently when I was watching a video where, I think spurred on by the fact that they're using a data pack on Hermitcraft that gives them access to the crafter. Mm-hmm. But whenever he's building a new farm, he was saying, I'm not looking up any video tutorials because I know enough redstone that I can come up with my own design. And then I have the added challenge of not building the same farm that I've done on previous Hermitcraft seasons. So we're on season 10 now. So there's a lot of seasons where he's just like, well, I can't do that sugarcane farm and I can't do that sugarcane farm. So I've got to come up with a new one. And it just creates more fun. Like, is it the most efficient? No. But he's also trying to make it look good. He's inserting the challenge to himself personally of not copying something that he's done before. So like you said, like, he's just kind of unlearning what he's learned and trying to come up with new ideas. And I think in a way, what ends up happening in those cases is that, I mean, particularly with Etho, because he is so knowledgeable, he might come up with a new way of doing something that no one has thought of before, you know, like a new kind of clock or a new kind of storage system. The way that he's got his storage system right now in Hermitcraft is mind blowing. Like, it's a really different approach. Mm-hmm. And I think that's spurred on by self-imposed challenges, restrictions, anything like that. We've also got, like, over the last few years, specifically, I think more for single players, but this might be something that could apply to servers as well. But Minecraft's development over the last several years has really broadened what a lot of, I guess we can call side quests, for the lack of a better phrase, bastions, archaeology, deep dark, armor trim, wolf variants now. Like, all that stuff is like, that's not progress necessarily. That's just like, do you want to do it? Sure. If you don't, that's fine. But if you do, have at it. Yeah. And that's going to bastions or traveling to get all of the armor trims, like, that's a huge sidebar to whatever project you were working on. But if it's important to you, then it's just more game content. And I think that that's one of the things that can help and contribute to a lot of things. I would even argue that the Caves and Cliffs update was just a giant distraction of, you should go out and explore the world more rather than rushing to kill the dragon. Like, it can be seen like, yeah, okay, I want to go get, the dragon and make the progress and do all the things, but like, wow, that's really pretty. I should stop and look at that for a minute. There's a real stop and smell the roses about Minecraft in the last, I want to say 2 to 3 years. And I'm here for it. Like, I think that rush to the finish line state of mind can be, we'll say, satiated by coming up with the kind of projects that might pace you differently, or backtracking. I think we've talked before on the show about wanting to do a project and then realizing you're going to need a ton of this or a lot of that or something that's very difficult to get. And you don't want to stop every 15 minutes and go replenish your inventory. So all of a sudden you have this knock-on effect of like, well, before I build this giant palace out of gold, I probably need, a gold farm, which means I need to go to the nether, which means I need to find, magma blocks. Like, the list goes on, and all of a sudden you've got a worksheet that's a mile long, and that's all gameplay. And, you don't necessarily want to rush through it. Although I can also see this flip side of that argument. And I experience this whenever I'm doing a redstone project, because I don't do them that often. I do find them very satisfying. But as I get closer to the end of a redstone project, I kind of just want to make it go. Like, I just want to hit the button and watch all the cool things happen. And so I will find myself pushing either a longer stream or rushing through. It might not look the best, but I just want it functional, because I want to see it in action after doing all the slabbing or all the digging or all the platforms or whatever the repetitive task you generally have to do for a farm in Minecraft to get it going. And I understand that push. And I feel like when that happens to me on something that's just a build that's meant to look good, I find that my itch to be efficient or push through progress is attached to my ability to build. So would Swift Sneak really benefit me in this build? I'm probably going to take the time to go get that if I'm really going to want it. Are a lot of blocks that I want for this thing going to be imperative? Should I set up villager trading or a piglin bartering for quartz in that case? Like, that kind of thing, I think is something that pops into my mind, where I'll get sidetracked because I don't want anything in front of my creativity. Like, I don't want to stop a flow to have to go get more netherrack. What I should do is go get a shulker box full of netherrack so I don't have to think about it for like the year. Yeah. And I find that that's kind of how I like to, I guess, pace that kind of stuff, is like, I don't want to rush through my creative projects, but I don't want to be sidetracked unless willingly. A really good example would be, I stopped production on West Hill for like a month when Caves and Cliffs came out, because we wanted a moss farm. And I thought, well, I'm going to build a moss farm. I'm going to want a lot of it. The server's going to need a lot of it. I might as well build one big enough for the server in the spawn chunk. So that's what I did. And that was about a month, I think, of streams to get that done. At the time, I was only streaming on the weekends. And I'm glad I did it, because I couldn't tell you how many moss blocks that I've placed around West Hill since I've had it. Like, It is an endless supply of landscaping blocks. And it's because I took the time to build that giant farm. But to me, I didn't look at it like this is distracting me or a deterrent from West Hill. In one hand, it was a good break, because that was about a year or so into West Hill anyway. But also, it just provides me with, I no longer have to stop what I'm doing outside of when my shulker box is empty and it takes me 5-10 minutes to go fill it back up again. Like, it's brilliant. It removes those blocks that otherwise slow down your creativity, not necessarily your progress.
Yeah. And you've got to consider, I think, where the finish line is for you and what kind of race it is you're running. Because if you look at it this way, somebody could run a mile and then do that 26 times individually, but they don't think of themselves as having run a marathon. Like, a lot of these larger tasks in Minecraft and pushes for efficiency have to be broken down into smaller tasks, and we know that everything is achieved a block at a time, but is the finish line for you at the end of a big build, in which case you've created a bunch of smaller separate win conditions for, like, okay, I now have a farm that will produce all of the materials I need for that big build, or like I have a cobblestone farm that I'm going to hook up to an auto smelter so it produces natural stone, and then I have this and that farm that are going to provide the wood, and all of the other resources can have individual farms built around them. And so that's how you pace yourself. Like, you start with those little tasks that end up snowballing into something larger, but then you got to find what the task is that you're returning to at the end of that feels like, okay, now we're just playing Minecraft and we're having a good time. And for some people, that's building. For some people, the creation of the technical projects is the thing that they enjoy doing, and that is what is their kind of like Minecraft happy place, at which point, skyrocketing technical projects might just seem like the right kind of pace for you, but it's all about finding the pace you want. In my case, I occasionally wonder if I will ever use the amount of resources that I've produced in worlds like the survival guide. Like, I think with the building blocks, it's certainly possible, but by the time I've used up like a full chest of iron blocks, I have probably generated at least 4 or 5 more double chests of iron blocks if I've left my iron farm running. And the same goes for the dig on Minecraft SOS, actually. I've only needed to... My chat has calculated this. I only need to save about 60,000 blocks to rebuild the entire thing in the sky hollow. And so far, I've mined almost 1 million blocks. And that's not counting the stuff that everybody else has been mining for me, and some of those blocks have been saved nearby as well. And like, the majority of that is stored in chests, to the point where I think, why am I still saving any of this? Because I don't really need to, and I don't think the other people on the server are going to need this much stone once I'm done either. But I'm kind of enjoying the idea that I will look at all of the stuff that is left over and go, well, if we've got time, I can build, a castle somewhere over here, or I can build like little houses and other kind of like stone monoliths and stuff with all of the material that I have left behind. And it branches out into other things to do. But that's all down to a project that is taking a while to come to fruition, and I'm enjoying the journey. Like, I think that's the most important part, is the focus on productivity is all about the destination, but then you've got to consider what happens when you reach the destination. You've got to find a destination where you're going to have a good time, or you've got to enjoy yourself on the journey.
I think that goes back to that uncommonality quote about Minecraft is boring because you're playing it as a solved game. And I deal with this all the time when you've got somebody that is, asking you about, I'm bored in Minecraft in chat, what am I going to do in your Twitch chat? And I think a lot of that, I just kind of dawned on me that those people are probably that goal focused. Like, they're not focused on the journey, they're focused on the end.
Yeah.
Right. And they're checking boxes and they've done the thing. And now that they're done the thing, they don't know what to do next. And part of the process of doing the thing is, like, if you slow down the thing, employ those things I mentioned from, etho of self-imposed challenges or different game modes or things like that, then I think that you end up with a more enjoyable path to the thing. And when you slow down, there's a lot that I think can be said about noticing different nuances in the game when you're playing, different connections. If I was rushing through the features that I was adding to the server this weekend, I wouldn't have come up with using hanging signs as fences around my carrot farm. I could have very easily just not put a fence there. I could have put a couple of spruce trapdoors down and been like, that's fine, and just rushed through and been done. But I was like, no. I mean, go back and watch the VOD for folks that are interested. I think I tore down those fences around the carrots like 6 times, and it's a 3x2 patch of carrots. Like, it is the tiniest thing, but I'm enjoying exploring my options. And when you are at endgame in Minecraft, you've got a ton of options for blocks and ideas. And I think the other thing is that because I've been on that project for so long, when I'm doing a new build, I'm trying not to just grab the cookie cutter repertoire of what I have already in my head. Like, I know how to build rafters. I know how to build roofs. but I'm purposely trying to make these houses a little bit of a different shape so I don't just copy the kind of roofs that I've done before. Same thing with my block choices. Like I was doing a deep slate roof, and it's like, okay, well, I'm doing a deep slate roof, but how do I make this not look like one of the other deep slate roofs that I've got before? And it's challenging when you've done, I mean, in one way, it's nice to have the Minecraft, the city of Westhill around, because I can look at all the different builds in Minecraft and use good reference and make things look like they all jive together. But then I also have the reference to saying like, oh, that was a good idea, but I did that like 6 months ago on that build. So I shouldn't just repeat that. I should try to do a tweak on that, or just choose a different color combo, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think going back to the goal-oriented thing, going back to people who are like rushing to the end and then wondering what's next, I think there's a reason that when you jump into the end portal, you don't immediately get the end credits, you get a poem. You get something that says, stop and think about why you're here and why you're doing this, and everything you do is valid. So, like, go out there and do more of it, basically. Go out there and, create whatever your imagination desires, and then you get the credits. And it's like, at that point, most people are like inspired or awed, or they're just kind of like they're feeling kind of emotional about the whole experience, and then you skip the credits and you go, oh, okay, well, now I have all of this other stuff to do. And obviously now we have the Outer Islands and we have the Elytra and Shulkerbox kind of side quest, and then back in the overworld, what can you do with all of that stuff? Endgame is where the game begins for a lot of people. So I think that's another really major factor of this is, people who are goal-oriented up to a certain point need to find ways of finding goals after that, which the game is getting better and better at providing, I think. For now, though, I think that's where we're going to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks, folks. Thank you so much for listening. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community, where pledging at any level will get you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live, or even watch the show live as we record it in Discord every week. And we also have our monthly Minecraft audio hangouts coming up very soon, so stay tuned in the announcements channel if you are part of the Discord, and you'll get news about when that's happening. We currently have 324 patrons, which is up 2 from last week. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, Party Voyager, and Yitz. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are available on Mondays on all of the major podcasting platforms, including YouTube. Email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is linked on the Patreon page, and that's where you can listen to The Render Distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where I'm digging a massive hole in Minecraft SOS, and the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, doing behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series, and I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft Recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online can be found at joelduggan.com. That includes the Citadel Cafe, my podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. I am Joel Duggan on social media. Twitter and Instagram are my 2 main hangouts, so check those out. Also on Twitch, same name, Joel Duggan. I am easy to find and easy to find streaming Thursday through Sunday, mostly focusing on finishing up the Westhill build on the Citadel server.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, so everything is a journey.